5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we are live.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Martin E. Segal Theater Center here at the Graduate Center CUNY in New York, in Manhattan, Midtown. And it's another day on planet Earth. It's the day after July 4th. And what a strange July 4th it was. People stayed at home, were advised to stay at home. People had to wear masks. Most fireworks, which normally is there to celebrate the independence from the UK, from England, were not allowed, so people couldn't gather. Of course, the discussions on Independence Day also went on. Is Independence Day for everyone, or is it for most of the majority of the white people who are celebrating it, but have they really shared all the independence with everybody? As you all know, the significance event that have become the Black Lives Matter movement, most probably in numbers, the largest, most significant and widest civil rights movement that has ever happened in the history of the United States. We just experienced it, and we all hope and think that this will be part of change. We see so many flags and posters out everywhere, and encourage everybody also to do that. But still the situation is complicated. New York had over 400,000 infections up till now, just New York City alone, with 25,000 people who died, 25,000, almost a small town. Numbers are up 85% in the US, and 130,000 infections since July 1st only. So it is really hard. 250,000 new cases in July. And most New Yorkers now use the buses. They don't even take the subways anymore. Meanwhile, our president does not seem to understand that science is real, that this is a critical moment we are in. He does not wear a mask. He, at some point, even suggested that people should inject disinfectant in their own blood. He put out a support right now that he liked the Confederate flags at the racing cars. Even so, most states now have said this is a symbol of slavery. It's a symbol of the past. It's a symbol of everything that was wrong, and we are shocked. So we all hope this will be a summer where no bad things will happen. Violence is up. Alcohol consume is up. People are at home. In Chicago alone, since June 1st, 8 young kids under the age of 10 died by drive-by shooting. 340 people killed in Chicago all year till July. It's kind of strange numbers. And of course, COVID, high unemployment, no trust in the government, no trust in the workplace, and domestic problems are fueling that situation. And killings that happened, like with George Floyd, are the match to really inflate all of it. And we hope it will be good. Rich people left New York City. They're most, whoever had a country houses there, poor people are in front of soup kitchens here, but life has started again. Businesses have opened. Some of the outside restaurants have opened, and we'll see where the artists are and will be. Broadway is closed till the end of the year, most probably till spring. All the companies, the small off and off Broadways, are not working. Everybody is out of a job. Musicians, actors, lighting designers, technicians. And we don't really know what will happen. The United Kingdom, UK, just put $2 billion towards the arts, theaters, galleries, museums, and places for performances. So I wonder what the US government will do, especially a city like New York City. And Mayor Bloomberg, the former one, did understand that right, that this is now has become a city of lifestyle where people go because of the cultural offerings. Where are the offerings that are so desperately needed to support what makes the city, what makes life. So, but all around the world, we talked to so many people. It's now week 15, close to 100 artists from all the continents, from all the places, are experiencing this serious moment of Corona, where we ask existential questions. And today we go back to Africa. We had many talks already from Cameroon, from Burkina Faso, South Africa, and other places. And today we go to the great country of Kenya. And we are here, and we have three representatives from a Kenyan theater scene, which also looks to the United States. Most countries actually in the world don't look as much anymore as they should be, but there are strong connections when it comes to music, dance, ideas of musical, so we have with us here Karishma Bhagani, who's a director, producer, a dramaturg, and a scholar. She studied at NYU and is a graduate of the Tisch Arts, and she has been expanding the art sector in East Africa. And she's a fellow at the Georgetown Lab at the moment. Also with us, Moraa is a Kenyan feminist writer. Annie, wave to us, and she fills the world with stories for and from African women, to feel them, to see them, to hear them, and to get a closer look at it. She's also a novelist and the editor of Jalada Africa. With us also is the great Sitawa Namwalie. She is an award-winning Kenyan poet, playwright, and performer, and she is known for her unique dramatized poetry performances, combining poetry and traditional Kenyan music. She was part of the Sundance Theatre Lab, the East Africa, the great Sundance Theatre Lab. We also had a couple of sessions with East African Sundance Lab, so Berta, Philip, and everyone. It was a great, great, great work. And Sitawa also works with the United Nations and holds a degree in botany and zoology and environmental studies, and also played tennis and hockey in her youth. Incredible, incredible artist we have with us today. And I apologize for talking so much, but you know, it's a great place on earth, Kenya. We have to know what is going on globally. So let's maybe start with Sitawa. Where are you? What time is it?
Okay, so I'm in Nairobi. I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, and it's after 7 o'clock. Yeah, oh. It's the evening. It's after 7 o'clock in the evening. Okay. Yeah.
What's your neighborhood? Where are you in?
I live in a place. Some people may know it. It's sort of in between Lavington and Kileleshwa and Kilimani and Valley Arcade. So it's a very central place. And it's somewhere I've moved recently. I've never been so central. I'm usually, you know, at least half an hour, 45 minutes away from everything. So it's so shocking to just be, you know, 6 minutes. It's extraordinary for me to be living here.
And where are you right now?
Oh, I am in Nakuru County in Joro. So I'm in a rural, yeah, I'm far, Sitawa. We're so far today. So I'm in a more rural area. I came here a few months ago because my mom stays up country and I wanted to be with her once things started. Just because, you know, she's in the vulnerable population. I was like, in case anything happened, I wanted to be here. And, you know, the country kept locking down and I haven't had a chance to go back. So we've been here. Yeah, Nairobi was under lockdown. You couldn't travel in and out of that county. So I'm in a completely different country, more rural. It's been great, just being with family. It's birthing season for all the goats. So there's lots of baby goats running around, which is adorable. So it's really nice. Rural, distant, but it's lovely.
How far away?
4 or 5 hour drive, depending on traffic.
Yeah, that is fun. And Karishma, where are you?
I'm calling from Mombasa, Kenya, which is, so we're really, really representing all of Kenya on this call today. Right by the beach. I live in the old part of Mombasa in Ganjoni, right near the Tusks, which is a very big monument, tourist attraction site here. But it's also the main road and takes you to sort of the central business district in the country, in the city. So that's where I'm calling in from.
That's amazing. And if I understand right, you were one of the New Yorkers who left. Tell us a little bit what happened.
Yeah. It was quite a journey, actually. You know, I'm working as an apprentice in the education department at the Roundabout Theatre Company for this last few months. And, you know, once Broadway shut down, we had been working from home. And, you know, within a week of that, was what, a Sunday morning, and I was listening to the press statement that our cabinet secretary and Mutahi Kagwe gave of Kenya's borders being shut down by the Wednesday of that week. So I called the airline, and I found that the last flight out was Monday morning. So I had 6 hours. I packed up my life for 5 years in 6 hours and carried the essentials and got to Nairobi. I'd booked a direct flight to Mombasa, but I got to Nairobi and they didn't let me travel further. So I had to be quarantined there for 14 days. And so it has been a bit of a grueling, traumatizing experience, but I'm so grateful to be back home, back in the motherland with my family, my grandparents, my parents, and my artistic community.
You left your entire apartment, all your belongings, you left everything behind, couldn't even.
Yeah, had to let go of a lot of things, really just packed the essentials, which basically comprised of my clothes and my books. Tells you a lot about me as a person, but yeah, it's my clothes and my books.
It's almost like it's like wartime. Sitawa, where were you when it all started? Tell us a little bit. How was the situation in Kenya?
So I was in Nairobi when everything changed, when the lockdown started, and it was really extraordinary. You know, you could see it was like a storm. You could see it coming, and my children's school closed. So I have a child in boarding school, so he came, and then my daughter is in a day school, so that school closed, and you know, now we were at home, and you know, and before that, of course, there was the panic buying. You're thinking, what will this look like? And so I went and I bought tinned food, and I bought dried, you know, beans and maize, you know, dried food, you know, and then we didn't. It turned out to be okay, and it's been a very surreal situation. Every you know, I think the first lockdown was 21 days, and then it became 30 days, and then an additional 30 days, and we had curfew, and you know, you stay in your house, you stay by yourself. You know, I'm staying with my children, and then you think I had this sense that the world has stopped, and then I'd go out and the world, you know, it began to get almost back to normal. So although we have lockdown, you know, if you go around now, people are really, you know, very active because, you know, people have to make a living. So people have to find ways of eating and, you know, feeding themselves. So there is a sense of we're just all surviving. You know, I feel like I'm part of the whole world, and my job right now is to survive. That's it.
So when did it start in Kenya? When did you have to stay in your apartment?
It was March 13th.
Oh, that's
it was. I think it was March 13th, right? When the lockdown started in Kenya. Yeah, I think it was March 13th.
Yeah.
12th, 13th.
It's been 110 days since they announced it, or 117 days because I've been tweeting and keeping track. 117 days since they announced it, and then they did the lockdown about 2 weeks after that. So I think you're right. It must have been around the 13th of March. Yeah.
Right.
And where were you when it started, before you went to see your family?
I was in Nairobi as well. I think my experience was a little different in that I have family who are in a different country, and I was about to have now I have a brand new nephew, and the hope was to go visit them. And so our family has been tracking Corona since maybe January, because once we saw, before it arrived in Kenya, the feeling was, I need to be quarantined safely. When can I travel? If I can travel, can I go and visit a heavily pregnant woman? And God forbid I catch it in the flight. So this is before a lot of international lockdowns and quarantine procedures were put in place. I'd already kind of isolated myself from the space on the hopes that if I could get a ticket and get enough money and it seemed safe, I would be able to go to be with my nephew when he was born and support my sister-in-law and my brother. But then in the span of a week, everything just changed. So the international borders were locked, and then a few days later, Kenya's cases are starting to spike up. And then a couple of days later, it looks like the city is going to be locked down. And so there was a lot of kind of very panicked decision-making in that moment. And like Karishma said, there's those kind of moments that force you to really consider what's actually the most important thing to me. And how can I do it? So even coming up country was such a tough decision because God forbid I had COVID and I was bringing it to my mom who is vulnerable and is in her 60s. And the only reason I was able to make that choice was I had already been locked away in my house for about 2.5 weeks. And I was calling everybody I knew, medical doctors and journalists, just to confirm, does this make sense? Can I go? Am I going to kill her? And you're constantly making, I think that's what's been most stressful about this situation for everyone. And mine was an incredibly privileged choice that I had to make. But I think for every single person, you're constantly making this stress-based life or death decision for going out to buy bread, you know? And that's been exhausting. That I can't lie has really, really been draining. And I'd say that for everyone.
What are the numbers in Kenya? How are the statistics?
I think, okay, right now we have 8,000 infections, 2,287 recovered, and 161 deaths. Those are the official figures today. Yeah.
Incredible. It seems, at least to our ears, so low if you think that only in July we have 130,000 cases in the last 4 or 5 days in the US.
Right.
400,000 infections in New York City. So is your government doing something right? Is everybody listening? How come the numbers are so low?
This is a question
asking
that
a Kenyan if our government is working.
People will say something as well. This is something that I think has been, the West is, I think, surprised about Africa's numbers. You know, all sorts of reasons have been given for it. In some countries, you know, like say, for example, Uganda's used to have, you know, has had Ebola. And I know that, and I watched them react and shut it down really quickly. Like they're really good at having epidemics, right? So they've got a lot of practice with it. And so they don't mess around, right? You know, Nigeria is another country. If you read about what they did with Ebola, they shut it down and really moved quickly and very, you know, really well. And you know, so the jury's out. I mean, okay, it may be early days, but right now this is the situation. You know, for whatever reason, this is the situation. But maybe Anne and Karishma have got something to add.
Yeah, I think, you know, just Sitawa, as you've said, you know, as you said, there's, I think, so many theories behind why, you know, Africa's numbers are so different. You know, one of them is that we have a very young population across the board, and this seems to be something that is affecting the you know, more vulnerable older population. Not that young people cannot be affected, but you know, that's definitely one of the factors. But I think for us, I think in Kenya, the government really did a good job, in my opinion, of shutting things down early. And I think our president and the entire government was faced with this dual struggle of, like, we have a lot of debt and we have a lot of loans. How do we keep the economy alive and then also keep people safe? So I think both those considerations, from my analysis and perspective, were taken, you know, into consideration when they made their decision to shut things down early. And I'm actually a bit nervous about what's going to happen after today, because there was a new press statement with our president announcing that there's no longer a cessation of movement between counties, meaning we can go from Mombasa to Nairobi, and that's now open. So today? Yeah, today actually, as of 12 p.m. I believe.
It's 4 a.m. tomorrow.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, 4 a.m. tomorrow.
Curfew day. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, I wonder if that's going to mean that the second wave is really going to hit us harder than we thought. But I think it's just a matter of us waiting and watching now.
How does it all feel? You talked about Ebola. We all know about malaria, something you live with. It kind of uncertainty. And now something happens in Europe or in North America, and the world comes to a stop. What are your feelings about this?
I mean, I think it's almost impossible to look at COVID. Or let me be more specific. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed how deeply interconnected all these power systems are. And what that means is what Sitawa said of the kind of racist perspective that was looking at Africa, Africa wondering why we weren't dying as quickly as we should. There was simultaneously inbuilt systems where something that, from my perspective as a Kenyan looking at American news, I'm always surprised by is people resisting the idea of like washing your hands regularly and wearing masks as a public good. I don't think that needed as much uptake here. The idea of doing basic work for the public good wasn't even outside of having gone through pandemics and viruses. It's just not, that wasn't a thing that needed to be educated into people. And simultaneously, there's a lack of real information because we don't even have enough testing kits. I'm not sure if those numbers are 100% accurate simply because we've not been testing as frequently as we should. And simultaneously, there's been a lot of police brutality that was happening because of the curfews that were quite possibly have made a positive impact, but have led to a lot of violent deaths. More people, I believe last month, died from the police than from COVID. So I don't think it's possible to look at it from, because I understand X, therefore I understand Y. I think what COVID has revealed is because of A, B, C, D, all the way through to X, therefore I can begin to process Y. And I think that's what people here are grappling with and perhaps uniquely ready to face, because it's never been simple. And I don't think anyone expected it to be simple.
Yeah.
And I just want to add a little bit on what Moraa has said. One of the things that's has really surprised me is the American response. So much of it is political, you know. So much, you know, wearing a mask has become a political thing. Washing your hands has become political, and you can see the impact. And then you have a leader who just got fed up. You're just like, I can't be bothered. So, you know, Frank, your leader can't be bothered anymore. Okay, so you guys are in trouble.
Yeah,
but what's been interesting is also, you know, I have my children. I've got 3 kids, and you know they're kids, so they regularly get ill. You know, tonsillitis and stomachs, etc. It hasn't happened. So all this time, and I'm calling my friends and asking, how are your kids doing? How's your family doing? And I think washing hands is proving to be something that is really an effective thing. And then they're not hanging out with their friends, where they get all these diseases that they pass on colds and flus and sore throats to each other. And so I'm not kidding you. It's so shocking. It hasn't happened, right? So I think we need to really revisit, some of the simple things that we've been doing that actually protect us. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so, you're so right. It's so interesting to see the interconnectedness and like how all of these, how this one thing that we're changing in our lives or paying more attention to is affecting all of these other health conditions, all of these other things that are usual for us to fall sick with, But I just want to add, I think, from an economic perspective, moving from a very stable market in the US to an emerging market in the Kenyan and the African perspective at large, I really think this is our moment. I think this will be our moment to bounce back as an emerging economy, and arguably the post-COVID recovery will be less brutal on us, because there's this sense of like we're used to, or the sense of being used to the emerging nature of our economy versus in the States, which is very stable. And now all of a sudden, the mint, minting more money is being printed. And so, that will really affect the exchange rates and stuff. So I think we're in for a very interesting economic time post-COVID, where as an emerging market, it's going to be I think it'll be our moment to, yeah.
This these are incredible times. The Kenyan government is doing better than the United States government, and Sitawa is right. Now, if you wear a mask, you're against Trump. You don't wear a mask, you're for Trump in Washington. So this shouldn't be. It's shocking. It's disrespectful to science. It's against common sense. And the basic idea is to protect people, to help people, to make our lives better, that there's less suffering in the world. And America will have to search its soul. And we all hope that the upcoming elections will change things. You guys all work in theater. So tell us a little bit about how's the situation in Kenya in theater? Is it stopped? Is it open? Is stuff outside? And what kind of theater do you do?
Okay, I'll begin. Okay, I'll begin. So I used to work in development and working with the United Nations, World Bank, etc. And 13 years ago, actually, I embarked on, I got the courage to do the thing I really wanted to do, which is to become a writer. I became a poet, and then that was one step away from becoming a playwright. And so I became started writing plays, etc. And it was an interesting time because it was a few years after the end of our dictatorship, right? So when I was the age of Anne and Karishma, I was living in a dictatorship, and the impact of that dictatorship was on so much and on your mind, because you knew the cost of putting one foot wrong, saying the wrong thing could cost you your life. And so you therefore self-censored a lot, and I wasn't one of those extremely brave people, so I self-censored. And then soon, shortly after the dictatorship ended, all of a sudden there was this flowering and this thing that I wanted to do, and I decided to do it. And it was also a time for the flowering in for many other people. So many of us, just woke up and started to pursue our creativity, whether visual artists or theater, etc. There was an incredible and amazing explosion. So that's been really exciting, and it's been growing, and you can see Anne and Karishma, the younger ones, so yeah, you are the younger ones. so I created whatever it was I wanted to create, wrote what I wanted to write, which was amazing. A lot of times the kind of work that I do is very political, and people would say, but won't you get arrested? And it's so exciting to know that I will not get arrested, that I just have the space to create what I want. So there's been there's been a growing, and then also the infrastructure, the frame, the other things that you need as a theater maker, have also been coming. So this program with the musical writing program that Eric Wainaina and NYU and the Sundance, this partnership is phenomenal, because we're going to produce 12 musicals like this.
Yeah, it had a real impact. If anybody ever thought, what impact does art have? What impact have universities? What impact have workshops have? One can take a look at this. But tell us about your poetry readings. Where do you do them? What audience comes? And so we can imagine, how does it look like?
So what I do is I write poetry, on any topic that I feel like. And then what I discovered when I first started in 2008 is I realized that I discovered that I write for performance. So then, as these things happen, one accident led to another, and we put them together. Me and a group of other people put them together, and we created what looks like a play, but it's actually individual poems. And then I always had a dream, apparently, to use traditional Kenyan music and musical instruments and musicians. So we put all these things together and hired a theater and tried something and got the most amazing response. And by the second show, I had been invited to take it to the Hay Festival. So in the next year, 2009, we're at the Hay Festival and performed in the UK. And the first performance is called Cut Off My Tongue. And it's really about, the things that make the things that make us, the challenges that we have as Kenyans, ethnicity, we've got a deep love of land and property, and just interrogating who we are, how we become the way we are.
Yeah, maybe Anne, tell us a little bit about, since you as Sitawa said, you're the next generation. What are you doing?
Yeah, so it's just interesting. Sorry, when you're talking about Cut Off My Tongue, I just flashed back to like the first time I saw you perform. Aki people, when you find the time and when you can afford her, because she should be charging like $500 a ticket, you need to see a Sitawa show. It's insane. I have never seen a performer who can hold silence in the way that Sitawa does. I learned that from you very specifically, how to use silence to hold an audience until you're ready to let them breathe again. Oh, I can't deal with you. Anyway, I just needed to say that because you made me flash back into that space. For myself, I'd say my first darling love is writing, and like many artists in Kenya, it's very difficult, and whether it's because it's a luxury to be a specialist or because African art forms have always been interdisciplinary, it's very difficult to just do the one thing and to say I'm a playwright or I'm a poet or I'm a this. I'd say more than anything, it's just kind of storytelling, and the root art for me, I'd say for that, is writing. So my first kind of performance started as a spoken word show. I still have one of my favorite poems I've ever done about periods, just why they're the devil, and menstruation sucks. And then from that, it just I kind of moved in different writing spaces. And I love performing and I love the stage, but it always feels like a mistress. It's the thing that after a year, I'm like, oh my God, I've missed the stage. I need to go back. And it kind of always pulls me back in, even when I step away for a while. So the most recent, I'd say, is a couple of years ago, me, Lea Kasam, and Laura Kumbo wrote and co-produced a show called Brazen, which was basically the telling of the stories of 6 incredible Kenyan women from Kenyan's history. It was co-produced by another group called Too Early for Birds, and we put to stage this, I don't know, Sitawa might even describe it better than me, but just a mixed media of dance and performance and fictional narrative storytelling combined with this arc, just kind of on stage celebrating Kenyan women. And the 3 of us since then formed a company, the LAM Sisterhood, and the entire purpose of which, thankfully to our founder purpose, is that in whatever medium or whatever format, including theater, which is all our loves, to just create stories that make people like us, African women like us, feel really seen, heard, and beloved, to tell things to create content and stories for them and about them. And so even right now, we're kind of figuring out, okay, we have a script sitting about periods. I worked in menstrual health for many years. I'm very obsessed with menstruation. And we have a script sitting that it's called Periods Period that we're just about to produce, and we pulled back on it because we had so many other things we're trying to figure out. You're trying to make a living. And now that COVID has happened, we're thinking, oh, what would happen if we translate it to a Zoom medium? And it actually fits really well. And I know Alea is working with Sitawa on a production that's going to be staged online. So I think that was kind of a ramble, but I'd say my theater practice is just rooted in the why of the story and more the what of it. And I'd say that probably applies to most of the practitioners here I know. Even the work we're doing with MTI, it's telling the story of Field Marshal Muthoni wa Kilima, one of the field marshals, aka top 2 people in the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, who's still alive, who deserves to be honored, and who has graciously given us permission to tell her story. And so we're so excited to work with Wanja Wahora, a brilliant musician, to find a way to honor this woman. So I think all my theater making is going to be rooted in finding ways to honor African women. I don't think there's enough of that in the world.
Beautiful. I started off on the stage, you know, trained in classical Indian dance and ballet. So I started dancing when I was 2, and that's what my first sort of entry point into performance was. Then I realized, you know, as I was growing up, that it really became the space where I could just be me without the judgment of society and expectations, and like I could just be who I was, and I was loved and accepted in whatever way. So that went on for a while. And then I went to school at NYU and realized that actually I'm more interested in the mechanics of how work is made and the behind the scenes stuff. And I always went abroad with the intention and the desire to come back. I knew that I was not going to create a career there. I knew I was going there so I could come back, you know, to give back to the root and develop my practice here. So more and more now, my practice has really moved into the producerial, dramaturgical, directorial aspects of creating new work, specifically on the African continent for an African audience, and then a global market as well. So, you know, I know Sitawa and I have the pleasure and honor of knowing them through the Nairobi Musical Theatre Initiative, which, as Sitawa mentioned, was co-founded by Shiba Hurst, Eric Wainaina, and Roberta Levito. And it's sort of an incubation
Roberta
space.
Levito, yeah, the great.
Yes, the great, a big mentor and a very large influence in my life personally as well. And so it's an incubation space that supports the development of new musical work by and for African audiences. So increasingly, you know, been spending my time on the producing side of things, really thinking along with our producing team about what it means to create work during this time. And I think it's a very interesting space to be in because we're a development initiative at this moment. So we're thinking a lot about how do we support the development and creation of work, because at the moment it's not necessarily based on production. In many ways, it makes our work easier, but also more challenging because we have to think about the logistical implications of being on Zoom and trying to write and develop new work when we're not in the same physical space and energy. So that's been a lot of what we've been doing at the Musical Theatre Initiative. And then personally, I've just been really interested in writing and researching more into what African dramaturgy is, what it was, what it looks like, and how it's evolved over the years. And you know, as Moraa and Sitawa have said, to call oneself just a specific thing, an actor or a poet or a storyteller is so, it doesn't encompass of the spirit of African performance in the same way. I like to say that in other parts of the world, it may be that performance is a way of presenting. For us, it's a way of life. And so I've really been looking into and interested and fascinated by how it has manifested in our lives in the past, in our ancestry, in our political landscape, and what that looks and how that will shape our performative future.
How are you as a person, or tell us a bit, if you can, how was it personal for you? What are you thinking about in these 110 days, 115 days? What do you feel is essential? What did you learn, or what surprised you? Tell us a little bit about how you experienced this moment.
It's been such an interesting time. I've got two personalities. I'm an introverted extrovert, or extroverted introvert. So I love to be by myself. I love to be sitting writing, but I also love to be out there. I just get a lot of energy out of interacting with people. So I switched on my introvert hat, and I've actually been really enjoying, this downtime. And then there was a moment, probably like a week or two into the first lockdown, and something lifted. I just realized, oh my goodness, I've been competing with the whole world. I don't know what I've been competing. So world, out there, you didn't know it, but I was competing with you, and it was really like a release. Like nobody's doing anything. We're not going anywhere, so it's okay. So it was it was like relax, breathe. And it's then given me time to think about myself and to interact with my children, and to do some of the things that I've been too busy to do. So I've been reading a lot. I've read lots of books, because I've got a whole pile of books that I'm one of those people who buys books, and if I go to a bookshop, I'm buying them and saying, I'm going to read this, I'm going to read that. And then of course, again, I've been watching. There's so much to watch, whether it's Netflix or it is, documentaries online, listening to podcasts, discovering new podcasts, reading things. So it's been really an amazing time to, to sort of go inside yourself and to start to think, what is really, my life about. It's also been an amazing time to watch the world. So I've been watching the world, and we are so lucky that we have the ability to watch each other. And so, watching the flowering, the growing of the Black Lives Matter movement, and then also watching what's going on in Kenya, like Moraa said about the violence, the police violence, which is so similar, so the things that are happening to African Americans in America, and then the things that will happen here and in our case, if you're poor, you're just in trouble, if you're caught on the wrong side of the law, but then also I feel watching a global consciousness, a raising of global consciousness. So, as an African, as a Black person, of course, I gain a lot from what goes on in America. And I'm just listening to people talking, Africans, Black people talking, sharing themselves, telling each other, telling the world how hard it's been. I didn't have to leave Kenya to experience racism. I started experiencing racism. We mentioned I played tennis. When I started playing tennis, it was soon after independence. It was a white sport, the white colonial sport. And so we were the generation that was desegregating. So we were going to schools and we were plunked into this space without the language, and then we had to figure out what's this. We had to face the racism on our own, and we'd go back home and our parents wouldn't understand what was happening, because they were giving us the best. They were sending us to the best schools, which were white schools. So it's been such an interesting. I've actually written a lot, and I'm really thrilled that I'm able to do that.
So you were able to write a lot.
Yes, I'm able to write. I'm writing a lot. I have a show on Thursday, with the Alea. One of the things you'll notice about the theater scene in Kenya is we do a lot of collaboration, particularly the women. I've realized, right? So Anne Moraa and I, Alea, Karishma, there's a lot of collaboration. So they wrote a play called Brazen in 2017, and I was given the starring part. I was very thrilled. So there's a lot of collaboration, yeah.
And the performance will be on Zoom or on
Yes,
Thursday?
it's going to be. It's a Zoom performance.
So you're going to be at home.
Yeah, it's called The Narratives Are Being Crafted Now, and again, it celebrates African women heroes, basically, but also references this moment. It references what's going on in the world in this time as well.
So you will be in
Makes
your
my little
living room.
excitement.
Yeah, so you will be in your living
so
room,
good.
in your living room with papers in your hand or on the table, and the camera will be on you.
So we're going to. It's going to be very much like this. So we're going to do, some of the things. Yes, we do have some props. So I don't want to say the props because they're kind of fun. So we're going to have some props. We're also going to ask the audience to participate, and we're going to give the audience instructions to do so that they create the atmosphere in their home, wherever they are. I'm here in my living room, and and Alea is about 10, 15 kilometers away from me in Nairobi. So we do it through Zoom, but globally as well. Yeah.
Great. And it's a nice idea. So you're going to instruct, so it's instruction-based art. People have to participate in creating things, putting something on it. I haven't heard that. That's good. So both of you others, how are you experiencing this moment? How deep did this go?
How what?
Yeah.
Say that again.
For Anne and Karishma, like what you said, how are they experiencing, Anne and Karishma? How are you experiencing the moment? How deep did this confinement or the lockdown go?
Yeah.
I mean, my children are having a very hard time because I have teenagers, but otherwise they're fine. But okay, so it was Moraa.
Yeah. Moraa.
Okay, Moraa, go ahead.
Anne, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not been easy, I can't lie, for me. And mostly because I think the first kind of month after it happened was there was a lot of upheavals even outside of COVID happening. My personal life, health, it was one of those, you're like, is Mercury having Lucozid again? Like, what's going on? Like, what is it? Like, there was so many, every facet of my life. Yeah, that one, it was in retrograde, whatever. I'm making jokes, but I'm such a believer in those things. But anyway, like, it was every single facet of my life was having its own upheaval. And so it was I withdrew a lot. I wasn't even able to read. I was playing video games, which isn't something I do that often. Civilization 5, kind of brought me back. Just playing, ruling worlds and settling and creating civilizations was somehow the measure of control that I needed to kind of get back out of that space. And then I think about a month after that, I'm very, very, very introverted, like by any metric. All my friends know, they see me out of the house maybe 4 times a year. Like, that's just the deal. So that part of it wasn't a big stretch for me. I was like, I get to stay in the house again, like I always do. Cool. But it was more how everything else was shifted. It was figuring out economically, like, where are we going to make an income? We spent a whole beginning of the year with the company making a fantastically gorgeous business plan and strategy. And then you can't leave the house. We had planned a beautiful theater show, Mekatilili Under the Stars, telling the story of Mekatilili Wamenza's trek from Kilifi to Kismayu over 1,000 kilometers at over 70 years old, set inside a planetarium. And it was going to have the stars of the nights that she was walking at that time. It was brilliant. And then obviously there's a lockdown and you can't be in groups and theater spaces are closed, So it was such an upheaval of everything that it took a while for me to recalibrate. It took a while for me to find energy again. And I think what's happening now is there's been a kind of shift, I'm trying to shift mentally even for myself, from being very kind of big output driven. In Kenya, especially, I'd say, because the economics of creating a theater show aren't great. It's not like there's a lot of money and support. So there's a way we've learned to produce pretty quickly, pretty effectively, and put it out in order to get money back in, because you can't sustain it just out of pocket. But that doesn't work anymore, not in this context. So learning how to shift into the new context, learning how to become driven a little bit more by process than output, and kind of falling back in love with the craft of it, falling back in love with writing and reading text. Right now I'm reading Octavia Butler because she's a goddess, and falling back in love with the words and how things are framed. And we do a thing with the LAM Sisterhood, you can subscribe, called LAM Letters. And once a month we just send a letter out, sharing the things that are going through our minds creatively. And it's just a free writing exercise. Yeah, you can subscribe. Go to www.lamsisterhood.com, click the bell and subscribe.
And then you get letters from
You get a letter once a month, and it's a free writing creative exercise, and we just share what we are feeling in that moment. And that's helped me kind of fall back in love with, you just write a thing, and whatever comes out is what comes out, and it goes out into the world. And you're not concerned about, will it make money in that moment? Will it win an award? Because an award might get you the prestige that you need. Will it get me in the room with so and so? It's just about creation and putting work out. And that's been such a delight. So falling back in love with process, I think, has been my challenge for this period. I'm not sure I'm in love yet. I think we're at best texting, but
as a fellow subscriber, enthusiast, and biggest fan of both Mora's and Sitawa's work, those newsletters, just the LAM letters, oh my God, I read the one last, that was sent last, and it was all the feelings all in one moment, and I had not felt that way in a very long time. And I was part of the tech rehearsal. I had the honor to be a part of the tech rehearsal for the piece that Sitawa and Alea are working on a few days ago. And it's not just instructive, like bringing people together in this, it's something else. It's just something else. It just, ooh, everything, again, all in one moment. Yeah.
And sorry, I do want to say, sorry, I just want to say, and thank you to you, Karishma and MTI, for this. I think the single greatest thing about the Nairobi and Kenyan theater scene is that you get to work with people you stand for. I have been a fan of Sitawa, like a fan, like, oh my God, I can't believe she's here. I can't even breathe. And the musicians are like, oh my God, that's Eric Wainaina, and he's in the same room and he's listening to I got to sing with Eric Wainaina, me, who has no notes, who does not know what a key is. And yet I was singing with Eric Wainaina. That's been one of the most glorious things. And one of the worst things that lockdown has taken away from us is being able to be in the presence of people you admire so much, who for some reason like you back, and work with them. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to say that credit to you, Karishma, because of the work you do with MTI.
No, that's so real. Honestly, I mean, it's Mugambi, another colleague and one of the participants of the Musical Theatre Initiative, the other day said to me, "Karishma, you slid into our DMs. You slid into the Musical Theatre Initiative DMs. Like 1 minute you're an observer, and the other minute, what just happened?" But I have to agree with you. I think the level of community and the level of just, I can pick up the phone and call anybody in the scene because I will get that response. It's just so real. I've never felt it in the same way. And it's so humbling to be in the same space. And there's always so much to learn from everyone around you. And I really miss that. I really do. My spirit, I like to say, is in Nairobi with everybody there at the moment. Because that is, to me, the most valuable part of our engagements, that we are building relationships that will last beyond whatever projects we're working on in this moment. And that really has been my personal focus in this moment. Just the first part of this lockdown was very traumatizing, and I didn't come to terms with that for myself because I tend to usually just bury myself in the work and know that it will be fine because the work is always going to be there for me. And so I really, I found a lot of solace and a lot of sense of community after coming back and being able to engage on a much more personal level with everybody that I work with. And then most importantly, my family. And it's just been so lovely to be with my grandparents and my parents after 5 years of, sporadic visits, because it's reminded me of where I started from, where I came from, and what not to forget. And, the other day, my mom brought home passports. This is just a moment that I will keep in my heart. Passports that belonged to my great-grandfather and they were the British Indian East African community passports that were given for travelers, and settlers from India to East Africa. And of course, during post-independence, you could claim British citizenship if you wanted to. But that to me was just, that's why I'm here. That's why I do the work I do. That's why I think about and reflect and write and research into what it means to be here in this moment and in the now. And that moment for me was why I'm an artist. So that's what I've been spending a lot of my time doing, just reflecting, thinking, building relationships, and trying to be a better person.
Yeah, why, since you are rethinking it again, the essentials, why do you guys do theater? What does it mean for you?
Well, I do theater because I have to. Because, I mean, for me, it's an incredible honor. I started this journey of going into this phase of my life in my 40s. I had always wanted to be a writer, and when I was about 10 years old, I wrote a story and shared it with a teacher. My father thought it was beautiful. He was like, "This is fantastic." So I took it to school and I shared it with the teachers and the other kids in my class, and they said, "You couldn't have written it." And I thought, and I quit. I thought, well, nobody's ever going to believe me, so why bother? And so it was always in the back of my mind. But I am one of those people who loves to do very many things. So being an environmentalist is also something I really wanted to do, you know. So and I did it. I worked as an environmentalist with the United Nations for several years, and then to do this. And when I got on stage, when I get on stage, it's like going back home. It's just a phenomenal feeling, and also to create for others, and to create so that you can see that there's a direct interaction with the audience. Because when somebody's reading something you've written, they're reading it, you don't know what happened, whether they liked it, how they responded, unless they come up and tell you. But when you're watching, when I'm on stage, I'm also watching, I'm also interacting with the audience, and I'm watching them, and I'm like, my goodness, it's direct, it's visceral, it's immediate. And I just love that. Yeah.
So I had to move because real life, there's like one socket in the room and my computer was dying. So I was like, can't find the socket. But why theater? So like I said before, I think I dabble a lot in different mediums, and I'm really interested in different media. And hopefully the better I'm getting, I don't know if it's better, maybe it's just older. The older I'm getting in the craft, I am beginning to get a deeper instinct as to what it's gonna sound. I always feel like ideas come from outside, and there's a universe that's just filled with ideas, and one decides that you're the one to do it, and you don't have a choice, and so you just have to make it happen. And I'm becoming better at discerning when an idea is for what medium. And when I was trying to understand that for myself, I realized the thing about theater that's so exciting to me is I don't think there's any medium where the audience comes in with such a suspension of disbelief. Like, by definition, you are sitting there looking at some wood blocks and they're like, this is ancient, blah, blah, blah. And this is a mountain and it's a castle. It is really not, clearly, to everybody's eyes. And yet you're there and the audience is there with you. And that total, by the nature of the form, that complete suspension of disbelief means you have a range I don't think even a novel or a film or a TV show can do, because the audience gives you a really specific permission to create anything you want in their own mind. And that's kind of nuts. It's a little bit narcissistic. It's very power giving. You feel very powerful when you're on stage. You're just there. You're like, yes, I am a goddess. And they're like, yes, you are. It's crazy. And there's something about the space that an audience has for story that theater has that I don't think can be replicated in any other medium, which is why some stories must begin on the stage, because maybe in the content, maybe in the form, maybe in the idea behind or the meaning,
the thing that it needs the most is for the audience to already believe before you've even began. And theater gives you that, which is why some of the most revolutionary work can happen on stage. It's why Brazen, about 6 revolutionary women had to begin on a stage. It wouldn't have been believed as easily on film or read as well or as a textbook or even as a novel. It had to be on stage. It had to be with 300 people sitting there being like, I believe you, tell me. And that's the gift that theater gives that I don't think I found in other mediums. And each medium has its own gift, but theater's audience and the relationship with audience is so powerful and unique that I know I'll always find myself going back to that space.
Yeah, there's so much trust, right? There's so much trust and faith that is blindly put on a theater maker. And it's profound. It's very profound. And it bestows us with so much responsibility. And it's a very large undertaking. And there's a big sense of, I have to do this because these many people trust me. It's a power-giving feeling for sure. And as I said, a huge responsibility. For me, why theater? Because in my religion, we have soul-to-soul connections, and there's very many gestures, and even through classical Indian dance, many hand gestures that suggest that one is giving their soul or showing you a part of their soul in some way, shape, or form. That freedom to be able to do that in a human form, without disrespecting whoever's up there watching us, is only found on stage. In this, not stage, but in the theatrical space for me. It is so liberating, and it is so change-making. I think it really is the tool who will change the world. Every revolution started with culture. You know, the face of the world that we see in this moment needs culture makers. You know, and you know, I've also been thinking a lot about what it means to be a woman in this field and this society, and you know, stereotypically, but appropriately in some way, shapes, or forms, women are seen as the culture keepers in families, the ones that will raise the children with culture. And that's what it feels like in the theater world also, as a woman. You know, we are culture keepers, and that's what changes policy. That's what changes the minds of presidents, the minds of powerful people, because everyone is equal when you come to this space, you know.
And you all seem to be attracted to the idea of the musical theater. Is that, you feel this is the strongest connection to a contemporary form of performance, actually, from your history or from your background or your interests?
Yeah. I mean, I just love musical theater. I have loved it. When I speak of suspension of disbelief, musical theater specifically is actually insane. That everybody happens to know the number in harmony and is dancing to a rhythm. It's crazy. I love it. It's so good. And the tradition we've come from, music and theater were not separate things.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think they're separate, distinct. It's hard for me to imagine them as separate things. And there's ways which we've learned through the mentorship at MCI. There's ways in which a note will do so much more for you than all the words I could ever imagine writing. Working with someone as talented as Wanja Wahoro, this times we've written a whole thing and we've collaborated. She's also a co-creator and writer on the project, and we'll write a whole section and it's brilliant and beautiful, and she'll go away and come back with a chord progression, and it's like, that's everything we're trying to say for the last 4 pages. So there's no point to that. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I think for me, it just comes from a deep, deep love of the form. And this is not just the American form, but like just the form of music and story told together from our history and others. And then the ability to work in a form that music does a thing that words can't and speech can't. And it's beautiful to work with people who know how to utilize that in storytelling.
I absolutely agree with Moraa, because you know in our traditions they're not separate. separated. The words, the music, movement, dance, it's all part of story, how you tell a story. And I think one of the things I love about this course is that this program that we're on is how committed the NYU, Deborah and Carl and Roberta are to supporting us to create our own voice. We're not we're not copying anything American, so it is really just giving us tools that we can then use to explore and create our own way, so empowering me to create in my own way. And if you look at the projects, they're all so different. My project is called Escape, and it is it's actually based on a story I was listening to. We have an FM radio station called Ghetto FM, and I was listening to a true story about a young man who escapes from prison, but ends up in the prison warder's home, the chief prison warder's home, and then is hidden under the bed by the prison warder's wife, very young. I mean, there's some basic things that are true, but that apparently happened. But then, of course, I've recreated it, and I use my co-creator is called she's a very well-known hip hop and she's a poet herself, and she is my composer. And so the musical is in Sheng, which is a language, a youth language among young people in Nairobi, certain parts of Nairobi. It's hip hop. It uses traditional musical instruments, like they're always following me, as well as Western instruments. So it's also in Kiswahili, so it's combining all these things that are creating something different and something new, and I've gotten incredible support for it, and courage, to mix all these weird genres together from the program. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what our mentors say about tools and not rules, but particularly for this reason. I personally come from an experimental dance-based background, and that influencing the creation of work feels so inherent, just because that's the way we tell stories here. You won't have something without the, moving your hand or moving your leg, moving a part of your body differently, and delivering that in some way or form. And it's a very community-based tradition, and so that's been really, really, for me, the way I see musical theater as the form. And I think it's interpreted in so many different ways all over the world. I think every tradition has its own version, and this sort of cross-cultural exchange within the musical theater context, from an observer perspective, and then also from an insider perspective, has been really interesting in bringing out what that means to us in our context. What's musical theater for us? And being able to have that space whilst also respecting the age-old traditions and forms that are present everywhere else around the world has been really profound. It really shapes our understanding of our own self and our own form, and places it in the global theater canon in an interesting way.
And what musicals do you look up to? What musicals do you like? The ones we might know.
Okay. My actual favorite musical is an animated film. It's That I Met Before Christmas. I can't watch. It's not even like the fanciest or whatever, but that movie makes me weep every time. It just, I don't know what it does to me, but every time he's just like, but I want to be Christmas. I'm like, but you're Halloween. And I just get really like emotional every single time. Maybe now that I'm learning because of MTI, I might be able to crack the formula that it hits. But I don't know why that's the first one that came into my head that I can't let go of. How about you guys? I'll think of smarter answers after, but that's actually my favorite one.
It's the Tim Burton movie, or
yeah, the Tim Burton, he produced it. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's so ridiculous. It's insane. And again, I guess maybe if I was a theorist, I'd be really thinking deeply about the suspension of disbelief, because it's not just a musical, it's an animation, also about Halloween. Nothing about it makes any sense. And here I am, like, weeping at my age without fail every single time. It's beautiful.
I'm kind of stuck between two, one for more sentimental value than the other. It was my childhood dream to watch Lion King on Broadway, and New York was never a thing in like this life plan of mine. And so when I went to New York for the first time, I was lucky enough to watch that on Broadway with my mother. And I wept through the Lion King on Broadway.
Okay.
I wept like a little baby having seen theater for the first time, because it just did something to me, you know, it just did something to me viscerally. And then also learning about, you know, Taimur's practice and how she used mask work, and how her practice was really informed by research in mask work from Asia. So that, and then the other one I would say more from a aesthetic perspective would be Fiddler on the Roof. I watched it in Yiddish with super titles. And one of the American classics, of course, but just the big tradition, just what a wonderful opening.
The Jerome Robbins version you saw, the original, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, there's several. I think one of the ones that I really enjoyed way back was I think it's called Once Upon an Island, set in the Caribbean. I think that I just some friends of mine produced it in Nairobi, and it was just delicious, and I really enjoyed that. Serafina, of course.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, I was like, oh my God, Serafina. Yes,
exactly.
Serafina. So good.
Yes.
Yeah, so good.
And then Evita, that I really loved, and also of course, Jesus Christ Superstar, because for some reason Kenyans are constantly producing that. I mean, I think I saw it when my kid sister was in it, and you know, she was, you know, I think she was in high school or something like that. So those are the ones that I remember for now.
So Jesus Christ is a superstar in Kenya.
You know, it's always being produced in Nairobi. They produced it last year, the year before. It's very popular.
It has to be written.
And what an interesting moment, I think. And normally, traditionally, as Karishma would say, you know, people try very hard to get on Broadway and to get a company and to be part of that commercial machine. But you said, no, I go back, and with some help, and we do our own creations. So it's a decentralization of theatrical productions, ways of productions, and also, as you all say, whenever I hear it right too, telling the stories of the Kenyan women, telling your own stories. Even so, in a way, one could argue, you say it's not the American movies or American musicals, but it's the American dream, which actually encourage you, do your own thing, you know, trust in yourself. So it's still that, but it's a good, I think it's a good impulse and an inspiring moment. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just want to throw in there, you know, I think as we've been thinking about the performative landscape, there's this idea of we don't get to see enough of us on stage. And that's a very big thing globally, right? We talk about what it means to be a person of color in the States and how we don't get to see ourselves represented in the space as much. But I think also for us here in Kenya, it's not only not being able to see our own stories on stage, but also just the access of having to make that happen is much harder than to, say, put on Grease. And that's a code that I'm still thinking about this and thinking about how do we crack that exactly? Because it's not only our stories and our representation and seeing more of ourselves on stage, but it's also how do we make that possible for our audiences first? And then how do we think globally? Because work from the region can easily be picked up by Americans, by Europeans, and that's really important because our voice and our stories need to be told on a global platform. But I think the middle step before that global thinking is really, how do we get our fellow Africans to see it? You know, what festivals are there in the region? What stages, what touring structures, what other resources do we have to see our own work? I think that's a different kind of empowerment of, oh, my fellow African did this, so I can do it too.
And do you feel that the kind of COVID time, the Corona time, will create a new form? Will something coming out that might be, or you're thinking about things that would be different than before? Or do you think you really use the time to finally do what you would like to do?
I think it's got to be like a kind of mix of both. I will say, and thank you for Karishma for raising that. I think this space particularly, which is why it's really, really difficult for anyone to give a one-liner of what they do, is on top of being a creative, you are a producer and a marketer and an industry shaper and a policymaker. And you have to be, because it is an emerging industry. It's a growing industry that definitely is better than it even was 5 or 10 years ago, but certainly is nowhere near, does not have the infrastructure that is required for anybody to very confidently state what I do is playwriting. It's like, and so how do you make money? Like, those become two separate questions. And so, it's just the fact of it. And so I think what's happening is there is going to be, for those privileged enough where you have enough social security, housing, shelter, food, water, such that you have the privilege to pause. I think it's going to give those people a lot of space to revisit old work and make it stronger. It's going to give people a lot of space to make new and innovative forms of theater, like what Sitawa and LA are going to do on Thursday. There is going to be a little bit of both, but I'm also interested in this as an entrepreneur. I'm really interested in this space in that way, because the need for innovation is not just about creative innovation, it's literal material survival innovation. If people who are privileged and who do have access to calls like this, who have internet and electricity at 7:30 p.m. on a Monday in their comfort of their house, if people like that don't find ways to make economic sense of the situation and provide and create economical infrastructure in a country that many times feels designed against creative economics, then we're not going to survive enough or long enough to make the work that needs to happen. Like, it's just not going to happen. So the challenge, this is the joy and difficulty of working in this space, is that it is not enough to be creative. It doesn't matter how gifted or incredibly talented you may be, and how hard you work in that space. You must also entrepreneur. You must also find funding. You must find a way to sell. You must find a way to make an income for people. And that forces you to be incredibly innovative, like insanely. Ideas will come from anywhere because you have to. And because if you don't, you can barely survive. And if the industry doesn't shift and you have in a position where you can create an industry shift, then thousands of people won't survive. The burden is really different, I would say, in that way, not from individual practitioners, but just on a scale of what it means to practice in a country that does not have a social safety net if you do not survive.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah,
sorry,
I hardly think that there is much. I mean, one of the things that happened at the beginning of the lockdown is the musicians that I work with needed support. I have other things I can do. Other revenue streams that I can create, and they didn't. And so one of the things we did is that we had a show on Instagram to raise some money so that they could send their families up country away from the city so that they can survive, right? So you're alluding to something, Moraa, that each one of us, we may be privileged, but we're actually supporting. We are the infrastructure that supports a whole lot of other artists. Right. So I'm constantly always looking and saying, oh great, there is a LAM Sisterhood. So the LAM Sisterhood for me are really important, because there's another center of creativity, and there's another center of creativity. And how can we then support each other to continue this journey, even as we are interacting, you know, so that within the region, we have, Uganda. Uganda has a theater festival. I know that Karishma, you're involved in that as well. So it has a theater festival, and it's been incredibly useful for me because I've written plays and then taken them to Uganda to an audience that doesn't know me, and so can judge what the play that I've performed and say something about it. And then help me develop as an artist. So you're getting out of your comfort zone, out of your comfort country, and into the region. I've also, last year I was in Zimbabwe, which was fantastic. You know, and I'm hopefully going to continue with that kind of interaction with Zimbabwe. Yeah. So really the growth and expansion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, there's a lot of good things that have come out of this time in as we think about shaping the sector, in that, you know, we're all of a sudden able to be on these Zoom calls and have online engagement from various, you know, parts of the world. And I think the question will become how we can preserve that going forward when things get back to normal without losing sort of authenticity, the soul-to-soul connection that exists within the actual theatrical space and within, you know, regional travel where people can go to different festivals. And the Musical Theatre Initiative took 4 pieces of works in progress to the Kampala International Theatre Festival last year to do exactly what Sitawa was speaking about with one of her pieces, you know, get that feedback, be exposed to an audience that the piece is not, the piece is foreign to, you know. And so I think the question will really become how we can maintain both. And in many ways, theater companies and organizations, I believe, will be taking on more media-based roles, entertainment-based roles versus just solely doing theater, which, if we think about it, is very much in line with what we're talking about as being Kenyan performers. We do everything, a little bit of everything, because that's how we are. Yeah. But to Mora's point, philanthropy, investment, philanthropy, investment, philanthropy, investment. Those, I think it's so important for our Africans to invest in African culture, because we're lucky enough at the moment to be getting funding externally, but I really hope that this moment increases the corporate world's eyes, or opens the corporate world's eyes and the philanthropic world's eyes to the power of their investment in the cultural sectors of their respective countries and governments as well.
So I need to say something about investment, Karishma. That is happening. There's for example, a fund called the HEVA Fund, HEVA Investment Fund. Yeah. These are extraordinary people. They spent as last few years testing on themselves and a small group of people whether it is possible to make a living through their art. And then now they've expanded. I'm one of the beneficiaries of their investment in my theater company. And of course, now this is quite unfortunate because it was supposed to all happen this year. Because, you know, I got the investment the end of last year. But fortunately they are very understanding. Yeah. And so I got a loan I'm supposed to pay back because I was supposed to have, you know, I had various performances lined up, you know, but it is happening. And I just find that really extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think HEVA is actually a really great model by which a lot of other, you know, there's HIVA, so many other organizations, Safe Source in Uganda, that are kind of starting up on that path and are already there and have established that infrastructure. So the more the better, you know?
Yeah.
And it is the truth that societies that work, that functions, have great art, have great theater. You want to see how great a democracy works, how great a society, how great a community is. Look at the theater. Are they supporting it? Do people go out? Do they enjoy it? So it's important to support because it represents the very best and the surplus of energy and some money and how to use the best way life is worth living. And I think in that symbolic space, that imaginary space, which is also real, it represents something. And to hear that from Kenya speaks so greatly that Kenya, something is happening also politically, that they are able to fight this crisis. They have young artists and established artists collaborating. So it's a fantastic news we hear out there. So we're coming to a close, and since we have 3 guests, normally often we have 1, but we thought it's to give a little bit of the variety, that kaleidoscope of Kenyan work by women. We thought it would be better to have all of you. But what advice do you have for young theater makers? What advice do you have for our audience? How should they use this time of Corona? And maybe, we start with Anne, and then Karishma, and then Sitawa.
Right. Okay.
With me, wow. No advice. No. I don't know. I'd say in general advice would be like, just make art you believe in, even if it's commercial, even if it's forget like about those kind of constructs. Like, if you believe in it, like really and truly, like that's something you believe in, then everything else will be figured out. Because there's so much that's beyond our control. You know, you should study, you should practice, whatever, but ultimately, if you don't believe in the thing you're putting out, somebody else will feel it. So just make art you believe in, I guess, is the only thing I can say. And about this time specifically, I'd say just get through it. A friend called me and was like, "Anne, you're surviving is a day job right now. It's a pandemic." And I constantly have to remind myself, we're in a global pandemic. Like, it's not an incidental thing. This is an unusual time. If all you can do is survive, that is, wow, well done. And if you can read a little every day, you can watch a little bit of something that helps you, you can make a little bit of something and it gives you joy, that's great. If you're making the greatest tome of all time, that's also fantastic. Like, release yourself from the idea that you have to be or do a certain thing other than survive in this moment and make art you believe in.
Yeah, have to agree. I think your health, your family well-being really comes first. And I couldn't emphasize that more. I think, in order to be the best version of yourself, and I've learned this the hard way, personally, in order to be the best version of yourself, you got to make sure you're okay. Whatever that means, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it, For those that are religious, pray. If that brings you closer to any sort of self, care, and I think care for the people around you. I think that's a really big part of this, because we really are a village, and the self will not be okay if the people around us are not. So reach out to people, and I think that applies professionally also. I think this time it should be focused on building relationships. I will still remember a week ago, Sitawa just called me, and it was the best conversation we had, just because we talked, and it was so great. And it's those moments that I think will stay in my heart and in the hearts of those that you reach out to. So if it were to be like an assignment, reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in a while. You might just make their day in a different way.
Yeah. So for me, I would say several things. Number one, this is a time to rest. Actually resting. You've got permission to take afternoon naps, for real. It's surprising how much you hold in your body. It actually is very, very surprising. You look like some people may look like they're not doing very much, but we are in a global pandemic, and that is a big deal. I think the other thing is that observe, pay attention, because although we're in a global pandemic, there's certain things that have stopped. There's also a huge uprising, and you can see that, like for me, one of the things that I'm seeing is just how fragile our systems are. Our economic systems are so fragile. Our political systems, our religious system, everything is so, we think we've been sitting on a great big you know, things. We haven't. We don't have great civilizations. We've got fragile civilizations. Pay attention to that, because that's the source of writing. That's a source of creativity. I remember during the post-election violence, I did my best writing. And actually in times of upheaval, that's the greatest, that is the time that is the most productive when it comes to creativity. For some reason, we're able to, it's like scales are lifted off your eyes and you're able to see. And then, therefore, this is actually the time for artists. It's the time for being creative. But meanwhile, in addition to the creativity, rest.
Yeah.
That is really, really significant and a great advice. And it's very encouraging to hear that also from you, and also to notice to our world where we live in here, to see that how you are dealing with it, and that you are creating new forms, and that you are enlarging the existing networks, existing ideas to create something new, that using a different old tradition, but perhaps with technology, create a form that hasn't been there before, with music people haven't heard before, with words people haven't heard before. And so great to hear, you know, also that going back to the Sundance East Africa project, you know, how much input that had. And it's fantastic to see Philip, Christopher, and Roberto did, and then the NYU workshops with Eric, that there is something that lives on, that they give, like in science, physics, you give impulses, and the energy in a way stays. And how great of Robert Redford, who created a film festival, but also saw theater is important. And then, you know, decades later, something happened. He had no idea about. People might not even know his name anymore, but they might know the Sundance Festival or the Sundance Theater Institute. So it is stunning. And I really would like to thank you for sharing the moment, sharing it together. And it was beautiful to hear you all speak, and the sisterhood you represent. And can't wait to come to Kenya one day and see your work, or you're in the US. So at the Segal, we will go around the world again this week, and stay with us. Tomorrow we have Emily Monet and Greg Hill. Both of them are from Canada. They're Indigenous artists. She's Emily, a playwright and also director. Greg Hill is the curator at the Museum of Indigenous Art, the National Museum. And we're going to hear from them. How's that going in Canada? How is that COVID crisis, the Corona crisis, and the time of Corona impacting artistic lives, the life of the country, the cities, and what is changing there? We hear from Japan, from Tokyo, from Satoko Ishihara, a young emerging playwright, a brilliant mind, very original, authentic work, still emerging, but someone who observes, as you all said, you know. And Sitawa said, this is what we should be doing, and put it into a form. On Thursday, Nigel Smith, who runs the Flea Theater and took it over, and is now in the middle of the COVID and Corona storms and upheaval and Black Lives Matters, and is navigating the ship, his own in his life, but also this of his theater. And we will hear from him. How does that feel like? And all the forces. And on Friday, a veteran, significant artist, Jean-Claude Van Italie, a playwright who wrote in the 60s. A lot of people say the most significant anti-Vietnam war play done at La Mama, coming out of there, was done by Jean-Claude Van Italie, who went on to write many other significant plays, and also has a retreat now in upstate New York, where he thinks we also have to focus on meditation and connect to a spiritual side of theater. So his whole journey of life, we will go back over. And I'm really interested to hear what he thinks about this also unprecedented time of Corona. So thanks for our audiences for listening. I know we went a little bit over time today, but I think it was well worth it. Already it should be much more time, and we should listen more. But I think we were able to get an idea, and congratulations on all your work. And
thank you.
Go out there, do your work, and the world is listening and interested, and this is important. And also to keep in mind that it is affordable. Broadway in New York, the family with 3 kids wants to go, and they take subways or taxi, and then they eat there out of $1,000. It's unaffordable. people can't do it anymore. So something also has happened here that is against the basic idea of participation, the access to arts, healthcare, and education, basic human rights. Forms aren't working, and we all hope that this crisis also will push us to find better ways and better forms as you do. So thank you all. Thanks for HowlRound again for hosting another week of Segal Talks at Emerson College. I think they had no idea that we would go on for so long and there's so many arguments. Now they're in, they cannot say no, it's too late. And Travis and Vijay and Sia and Sanyang and Andy, my Segal team, thank you all. And to the listeners, thank you for taking your time. This is so important that Karishma and Sitawa and Anne, Moraa, they know there are people interested, people are listening, and perhaps also there's something inside it that might change your life. And after all, this is what this is all about, that we all as citizens, as part of the community, that we change, that we do an authentic change, and artists really can help us. And what they said, to rest, to observe, to be authentic, and to connect and get through it day by day. Nothing lasts forever, not the good things, but also not the bad things. So one day this will be over, and I hope we all will be ready for a better way of spending our time on planet Earth. Thank you all, and to our audience, you stay safe.
Thank you.
Wear a mask, and
yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.